Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a big show for you. In the middle of the show, Shohei Ohtani will be going live. We'll try to get as much breaking news on that as we can. Obviously, the scandal around that, he's going to be going live in about 40 minutes from now, so right as we're wrapping up. But before we get to that, remember, there's other stuff to talk about as well. March Madness is in full swing. The first round, the weekend is done. We have made it through the round of 32 onto the Sweet 16. We're going to break down all of that, the last remaining Cinderella, and everything that's taken us to this point in the tournament. NFL has new rules being passed. The hip drop tackle has been banned. Talk about my thoughts, players' thoughts, as well as the other rule that just was passed, which is giving the coaches a third challenge if they get one right instead of both of them. And then we will end our show talking about baseball. Jordan Montgomery is still on the market with opening day, just 3 days away now. Shohei Ohtani, we mentioned him a little bit in the intro. If we get any news from that press conference that will be starting at 5:45 Eastern Time, we will talk about that as well. Segment 4 will be our baseball segment, though. But before we get too far into our first segment here, which will be breaking down March Madness, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. You leave a tip or donation. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen there. We'll have a discussion about what you have to say. We appreciate anything that you do give. Once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we're going to start in March Madness, the big tournament, the big news in sports going on right now. The Sweet 16 is set. And every year there's always that one or two Cinderella team. And this year there hasn't really been a true Cinderella, I would say. NC State is the highest remaining seed. They are an 11 seed. They have had a very interesting path to get to where they are right now. Obviously, starting as a 10 seed in the ACC tournament, beating Duke, UNC, Virginia, and winning the entire not winning the entire ACC tournament, and then they win their next two games. They beat South Carolina, and then they take on Oakland, who had just finished beating Kentucky in that first round, and what was a really solid game. NC State won. They're on a hot streak right now. They are, I believe, the hottest team in the country now. Now that they've won, 7 straight games. Before that, JMU had that, but they got destroyed by Duke over the weekend. We won't get too much into that. Hurts my little Duke brain. But the last I guess team you could call a Cinderella is NC State, and it's not really quite the same this year because there isn't that magic school, that team from a mid-major conference that most of the country hadn't heard of, that's in the Sweet 16 now, which isn't always a bad thing. We get the cream that rises to the top. UConn is dominating. Houston survived a scare at Texas A&M earlier yesterday. If you were watching, Texas A&M pulled off one of the craziest shots I've ever seen to send it to overtime. Eventually, Houston did pull that out, 100-95, though. Crazy games this weekend. There were a whole bunch of overtime games. We talked about NC State and the Wolfpack already. I believe that game went into overtime as well. And Purdue absolutely dominated against Utah State this last weekend. I mean, Zach Edey, you remember him. You remember that team that lost to the 16 seed last tournament. They are ready to go on a run. It is scary to think about. That team is really, really good. They've looked like probably the second best team, maybe even the best team in this tournament, besides UConn, who also has won every game by a very wide margin. Northwestern kind of gave them a little bit of a battle, but it never really was that close. Taking a look at the rest of the the rest of the results, I mean, there weren't, like I said, there haven't been that many. There hasn't really been a true Cinderella this season, which NC State can be that Cinderella. We'll see if they can make it past Marquette. Marquette just looked unstoppable against a Colorado offense that put up 102 points in the first round against Florida. Um, they killed it. Marquette is a scary team. They're a 2 seed heading into this weekend. I'm curious to see how NC State tries to handle them because they can shoot the lights out. Uh, they're a very athletic, quick team, really good on defense as well. And like I said, they can shoot with the best of them. It's a tough draw for NC State. They haven't had the hardest road, I'd say, to get here, but this is their first real test since the ACC tournament. And they did beat 2 teams that are in the Sweet 16, Duke and UNC. Duke, who, if they win and Duke pulls off the upset at Houston, they could have a rematch in the Elite Eight. Duke, who, oh my goodness, they went off against James Madison. They played as perfect of a game as you can. You shoot 50% from three, 52% from the field. They dominated that game start to finish. JMU looked like a team that was not ready for the bright lights of Duke. And Duke just looked angry. I don't know why they were so pumped up to play James Madison. But they went out there. Jared McCain dropped 30 points. He set a freshman record for threes in a game for all of Duke history in the first half. It was absolute domination by the Duke Blue Devils yesterday. Not a fun night for me. But that Duke-Houston matchup, if Duke can continue to play like this, I think Houston was my pick to win the NCAA tournament when I was making my bracket before the whole thing started. They're probably number 3 for me now. I think Purdue and UConn have jumped them, at least in my opinion. But if Duke can continue to play the way that they did against James Madison, I mean, it's hard to picture a team that can beat them. They were shooting the lights out. Their defense was playing phenomenally. That's a scary team. They finally figured out how to play basketball. Duke can make a run. Houston is that really, really good defense. That's probably the game that I'm most excited for this weekend, that Duke-Houston matchup. Just because if Duke can, like I said, if Duke can show up like they did yesterday against James Madison, I think they can give them a run for their money. Gonzaga-Purdue is also a good matchup. Both of these teams who have a history of of falling short in the tournament. Gonzaga, who for the last however long it's been, the last 10 years or so, have always been ranked very highly in the tournament. They've just never been able to get it done as a 5 seed, taking on Purdue, a team who has a history of choking in the tournament. Obviously losing to double-digit seeds 2 years in a row does not help your outlook on that from a public perspective. But one of those teams is making it to the Elite Eight. I think Purdue, the way they're playing with Zach Edey down the middle, and that 3-point shooting, they were hot. Put up 106 points. They could not miss. And that entire region is good. Creighton, Tennessee. I don't think it'll be a barn burner, but if Tennessee is on their game, Creighton's always on. Creighton is always going to score the ball. They're always going to play solid defense with their 7-footers on the inside. If Tennessee can make their shots, that game could be one of the most exciting of the entire tournament. But outside of that, there isn't really. Excuse me. Outside of that, there isn't really that many crazy games. It is kind of chalk this year. There's in every single 1 seed, 2 seed has made it this far. There's 1 3 seed that's out. 2 3 seeds that are out. But it's a lot of chalk so far this year in March Madness. So I'm excited for the Sweet 16. That's happening on Thursday, Friday. Uh, a lot of stuff can happen. There's still heavy favorites, and there's still a couple guys. Clemson is still in there. Clemson was probably was one of the teams that was most picked to get upset in the first round, and here they are in the Sweet 16, taking down New Mexico, taking down Baylor, and Alabama as well, also a pick to get upset sometimes. That game against College of Charleston and against Grand Canyon, excuse me. Both of those games were wild. If you haven't watched those, go watch those games. It was nonstop offense, craziness going on. People were falling all over the floor, and now they get to play North Carolina. Uh, there isn't really a bad matchup in the entirety of that Sweet 16. There's a couple games I don't think will be that close. Marquette, NC State, UConn, San Diego State. But outside of those games, I think every game is going to come down to the wire. I'm very excited for it. Anyway, stick around for our next segment. We're going to transition out of basketball, head into some football talk. They made some new rules. New rules came out in the NFL. We'll break all that down, the reaction from the media, reaction from players, my reaction, everything like that. That is coming up right around the corner. Thank you, everybody, so much for sticking around. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in, we just finished breaking down everything that led up to the Sweet 16. In this segment coming up, we're transitioning into the NFL. They passed some new rules today. 2 new rules were passed. A couple more were voted on. There's a lot more coming out of the NFL right now. The owners' meeting are currently taking place. But before we get too far into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcspodcast.net. Once again, that's gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. If you leave a message, it'll pop up on the bottom of the screen there for you, me, everybody else to see. We'll have a little discussion about what you had to say. We appreciate anything that you do leave. Once again, that link to leave a tip or donation is gsmcpodcast.net. Like I was saying, new rules in the NFL dropped today. 2 new rules, a couple more were voted on. I want to talk about those as well. But before we get into that, the rules that passed. The more controversial one is the hip drop tackle. And it's not controversial in the fact that people are saying it isn't that they don't understand the reason. The hip drop tackle, for those who are unaware, the hip drop tackle is when you are behind a guy, you grab them by their hips, and then you drop your entire body weight to the ground. More or less. There's a whole bunch of other rules, but this rule would make it a penalty to do that. The NFL says it is, dangerous for players. 20%, 20 times more likely, or 20% more likely to get hurt on a play like that than a normal tackle. But the issue comes in not against player safety, because The NFLPA was actually against this rule. They did not want this passed. The issue comes in where you're giving more power to the officials. The officials now have the ability to, much like the pass interference thing that everyone was going over recently. You should be able to review pass interference, all these judgment calls. They're adding more judgment calls to the league, in a league that needs less of it. And I understand it's for player safety and all that, but sometimes you just have to make that tackle. You don't ever have to do helmet to helmet. That's not something that ever has to be done. But if you have someone by the waist and they're dragging you, I mean, how else are you supposed to tackle? You're supposed to let go and grab their feet? It's a lot harder to tackle that way. And players are against it because, again, this is the judgment call. There are plenty of instances that I'm sure you can imagine where where refs are looking at a big play, guy breaks away down the sideline, safety catches up to him, dives, tackles him in what maybe could be considered a hip drop tackle. If you go and watch some highlights or compilations of what people are calling hip drop tackles, some of them are egregious. There's ones where they grab them and then they just sit down on their butt. They take out their legs and everything, and that's dangerous, and it leads to injuries. There's been some major injuries in recent seasons with this play specifically, but it also, when you're looking at those compilations, there's just people diving and happening to grab their waist. At a certain point, it's not a hip drop tackle, and there's going to be so many of these that could really negatively impact the game. We have so many people already complaining about the refs, and there's no reason to give them another whistle. It's all about player safety. But, and normally I'd be on board with this as well. Normally I would. But when the players themselves are out here saying, no, we don't need this to be a rule, don't pass this. And then the NFL not only passes this, but unanimously passes it. It's a completely different story. I always tend to side with the players because they're the ones playing. They're the ones that know what they want to happen. They're the ones that are most affected by these rules. And if they say that they don't want this rule, then don't put this rule in. I think the players should be able to veto rules. New rules that get put in. I think every team has a team representative. I think if, 2/3 of them decide, or if all of them, I guess it probably would have to be unanimous. I think if all of them decide, hey, we want this to not be a rule, it has to be done that season. They can't go back in the rule book and get rid of it. But if new rules are getting voted on, I think players should be able to have a say in it. And I know they put out saying that they didn't want it, and then it just doesn't matter. That's something that's never going to happen, though. But I don't know. It's not a major change, but it could be a major change. It's one of those rules that I'm sure, like, it doesn't even take that much to picture it. Just a big game, someone makes a controversial call based on this rule. I can see it happening really, really, really close into this season. But the other rule that got passed is something that I'm much more in support of. In the NFL, you only get 2 challenges. In recent years, they've extended it so that if you get both of those challenges right, you can get one more challenge, a third coach's challenge. What they've done now is you just need to get one of those right to get a third coach's challenge. Again, not going to be that big a deal. I'm all for coaches' challenges. I love coaches' challenges. They come with that risk reward. They don't get used all that often. But it kind of is a vote of confidence when your coach challenges something for you, and now you get more of that. Obviously, you have to get one right. You can't just be throwing out challenges left and right willy-nilly, because there is a consequence. You don't want to get that timeout taken away. But I'm a big fan of this rule. I mean, like I said, this one isn't going to matter that much. That hip drop, neither of these rules, I don't think, are going to affect it too much, but if out of those 2 rules, I think the hip drop tackle is one that I expect to really to have a major impact in at least one game next season. I do believe that is a rule that will change the outcome of one game, make a loss into a win into a loss for some team. And that's what I'm not a fan of. That's what I really don't like. I know it's necessary to player safety. Again, all about player safety here. But the players are against it, so there's no reason to make this rule. Who knows? Maybe 10 years from now, I'll be singing a different tune. But right now, I just think it's a little unnecessary. But there were a couple other rules that were proposed. And the most interesting one to me is the new kickoff proposal. It kind of mirrors that XFL kickoff, which also kicks off this, or the former XFL kickoff. The UFL is not doing that. The UFL does actually kick off this week on Saturday, I believe. So, very excited for that, actually. Spring football is back. It's, woo! But the new kickoff rule is something that really excites me. It's not quite the XFL kickoff, but you're gonna line them up like they did in the XFL, 5 yards apart from each other. No one can move until the ball either lands or is caught by receiving team. And the goal of this kickoff, and what I really like about this, is it's helping cut down on those massive hard collisions where you're getting 30, 40 yards of steam getting at you and then you're running into someone. But it's bringing back kickoff returns. Kickoff returns don't happen all that much. But this one would incentivize kickoff returns because the touchback out of the end zone would be penalized more. I believe the rule has it taking it out to the 35-yard line instead of the 25. So they're trying to get you to kick it in the field of play so that a return happens. And if a return doesn't happen and it goes into touchback after hitting before the end zone, then it's going to be the 20-yard line, I believe, for that touchback. So they're really trying to get that kind of get the kick return back in the game while keeping it safe. And I'm a big fan of that. The one thing where it kind of has downsides is the onside kick. Because you can't do surprise onside kicks anymore. You have to be in that certain formation. You'd only be allowed to do onside kicks in the fourth quarter, and you'd only be allowed to do onside kicks when you're losing in the fourth quarter. But again, something that I think could change that, you give them a 4th and 15, 4th and 20. I don't know. Something that you think would be fair. I'm a big proponent of that. The onside kicks happen at less than 2% clip since the rules changed. And you can't have uneven formations, although you could have those uneven formations again in the onside kick with this new proposal. But those 4th and 15s are just as, impossible to get. The 4th and 15s, I feel like the odds of that, of converting 4th and 15. Let's find out. No, they're not going to tell us. Anyway. Here we go. 4th and 15, you have... In NFL history, it's a 20% conversion rate. If you go to 15 plus, it's 13% conversion rate, which, it doesn't happen that often, but it lets you... It allows you to add more excitement into the game. The onside kick is a fun play, but it's not something that, can... It's not something that really is successful. It's so unsuccessful that it's basically not applicable anymore. I mean, they'd have to make some more rules for this. The 4th and 15 at the 20% was not what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be more around 10%, which is, I feel like, kind of a good clip for these last-second efforts. Converting, it's 4th and 15 is not easy. Don't get me wrong. But I would be very excited. I'm a big fan of that kickoff rule. I hope that it gets voted on. The Giants owner said they were hoping on another vote there, trying to force another vote tonight. We'll see what ends up happening. But a lot of new stuff going around in the NFL. Let me know what you guys think of these new rules. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hip drop tackle, I understand the reason, but if the players are against that rule, I'm against that rule. And the challenge is just, it happens. But I'd really like to see that kickoff rule. I really would. Anyway, in our next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the Titans. The Titans have had a really interesting offseason. They most recently brought in L'Jarius Sneed over the weekend from the Chiefs for a 3rd and a 7th round pick. The Titans don't look now. The Titans might rebuild in 1 year. That's probably an overreaction, but we'll get into all of that in just a little bit. Stick around through this break. We'll break down the Titans. Baseball coming up next. Shohei Ohtani press conference is happening in just about 15 minutes. So we'll try and get as many bits and pieces from that into our show as we possibly can. But thank you, everybody. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the new NFL rules that just got passed. The hip drop tackle, the much more controversial rule, but the NFLPA saying they did not want that rule to be passed, and the NFL passing it in the name of player safety. Two kind of opposite takes there from opposite parties. Not what you would normally expect. The other rule that passed is giving a 3rd coach's challenge to a team if they only get 1 right instead of 2. We also, in our first segment, broke down March Madness. The Sweet 16 is now set. NC State, the last double-digit seed. The next lowest remaining seed is Clemson, a 6 seed. So it's been pretty chalk in this bracket so far. But anything can still happen. All the 1 seeds are left. All the 2 seeds are left. Anything can still happen in that March Madness. In this segment, we're going to continue talking about some football. L'Jarius Sneed, cornerback from the Chiefs, had just came off an incredible season, was just traded from the Chiefs to the Titans for 2 picks, a pick swap and a 3rd, basically. So they did not give up that much. The Titans have had a really interesting offseason. They were not in a very good spot to start, and they've kind of done a lot to improve. We'll get into all of that in just a second, but before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. Appreciate anything that you do give. If you leave a message with that tip, we'll have a discussion, about what you said. We appreciate anything that you do give. And yeah, once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But the Titans have had a very interesting offseason. We're going to start off... Oh, excuse me. There we go. Sorry about that. I don't know why the background wasn't loading. Anyway, the Titans have had a really good offseason, I think, in my opinion. They're probably up there for one of the better off seasons. I'm not going to say it was the best, But adding L'Jarius Sneed in your corner, getting Calvin Ridley on the outside to go next to DeAndre Hopkins, who had a sneaky good season with pretty bad quarterback play. I know that's kind of his MO, but having those two, wide receiver one, wide receiver two, bringing in Tony Pollard as well, they shored up the offensive line. They've done a lot. I've been very impressed with that Titans offseason. They're building around Will Levis, who showed out at the end of that season. He didn't do anything super impressive, but he led that incredible comeback win against the Dolphins. He, he he played really solid in some games. You know, it wasn't C.J. Stroud level rookie season, but he was probably the second best rookie quarterback. Uh, so very impressed by him. The Titans are building around him. L'Jarius Sneed is a huge get for them. A Titans team that just straight up was not very good defensively. Not a good pass defense. Just not good at all. They bring in one of the top corners from all of last season in L'Jarius Sneed, who, next to Chris Jones, was probably the engine that made the Kansas City Chiefs have that elite defense, made it go. The Chiefs just did not have the money to pay a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, so he was traded. And the Titans didn't really give that much up for him. I know it's an expiring contract, but getting a guy like L'Jarius Sneed for basically a 7th-round pick is crazy. And outside of him, they also brought in Sean Murphy Bunting and Kristen Fulton to shore up that cornerback. So they have an entire new cornerback room. So very impressed by what they've done. They lost Derrick Henry, obviously, but they also, excuse me, they lost Derrick Henry, but they replaced him with Tony Pollard. That's probably a downgrade. I know Tony Pollard's much younger than Derrick Henry, but he's not quite as good. I don't think you're not going to replace the king like that. Derrick Henry is a huge loss for them, but they bring in Lloyd Cushenberry, who's one of the elite centers in the league, to shore up that offensive line, get some more offensive line help around him. You just talked about bringing L'Jarius Sneed in. The offense is going to be much better. And in a division that isn't going to be up there for the best in the league, but it's probably going to be a tough one, that AFC South, you have maybe the Titans are still probably last in that division. I don't want to get too overhyped about them. They've had a very, very solid offseason. But you're in a division with C.J. Stroud and the Texans, who made the playoffs last season in his rookie year and only seemed to improve this offseason. You have the Colts with Anthony Richardson, who almost made the playoffs last year, and the Jags with Trevor Lawrence also kind of choked their way out of the playoffs. But all of those teams are potential playoff teams. I wouldn't be surprised if any of those 3 teams made the playoffs, and the Titans are making a push there. They're not quite at the level, I don't think, but this is a really solid offseason. They've had to overpay a little bit to get some of these guys, but Calvin Ridley out there on the outside with DeAndre Hopkins, that's going to be a really great combo for Will Levis, who kind of was just chucking it up to DeAndre Hopkins down the season. When your other option is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, can you really blame him though? It's a very again, it's not the flashiest offseason, but you do get a couple big names. You do get a couple guys who can really who can really make a difference there in the league. On your team immediately, some established stars, some veterans, some leadership. And then you have a pretty high pick in the draft. I believe they have the 7th overall pick this year. And the way that the draft's going, with the Chargers now losing all their wide receivers, they're probably not going to get tackle, offensive lineman at 5. The Giants probably aren't either. They're looking at a whole lot of other holes. They have a lot of holes to fill. So the Titans might get offensive lineman 1 off the board at pick 7 in a draft class that's loaded with offensive linemen. There's like When I did my first mock draft, I believe I put 6 or 7 offensive linemen in that first round, and you can get the best one. There's a couple guys up there. Joe Alt is probably my tackle one. Um, be a great fit for the Titans, team that is not going to make the playoffs this season, but they could make some noise. They could be much better than people expect, especially with all of these offseason moves that they have made. I've been very, very impressed. But L'Jarius Sneed is a huge signing. You look at a guy who was always kind of a good corner. L'Jarius Sneed uh, really broke out with I won't call it a breakout. You know, he just became he became more known as an elite corner. He was more of a shutdown corner. He only uh, the target and the most important stat to look at there is targets against, how much he was targeted. He took a huge step up in the amount of targets that he took. Uh, I believe, here we go. He just was great at disrupting passes. He disrupted 14 passes. That's career high for him. He forced 3 turnovers. Uh, a little down in tackles, but that's because he wasn't getting targeted. Uh, Again, he was locking people down. He's been really good. He got put with that franchise tag today. So yeah, there we go. He saw 100 targets. So yards per completion were down. Yards per target were down. He didn't give up a single touchdown all season. He's very, very good. And he deserves that contract in, or he got hit with the franchise tag, but that's really not a lot to give up for a guy that can be a shutdown corner. Shutdown corners are hard to find, and they're probably the hardest position to play. And in a division that is just getting better, it's not as loaded in wide receiver as it probably seems. You have Michael Pittman in uh, in Indy. You have that stable of wide receivers down in Houston with Nico Collins and Tank Dell, who both of those guys could be wide receiver one on any day. So you need to. And the Jaguars have their guys as well. Evan Ingram, not a wide receiver, but he kind of plays like one. Christian Kirk, been a target monster down there. But yeah, huge for them to go get Snead. They needed him to really help shore up that defense. A team that really lost a lot this last season and this last offseason. Like I said, I don't think they're ready to compete just yet. But the Titans, you look at that division, I think they could probably they're not going to make a wild card. That we went over this already a couple episodes ago. There's only like 3 or 4 teams in the entire AFC that I couldn't picture making the wild card. Um, it's the AFC is going to be wild this season. I'm very excited to see the bloodbath that it turns into. Because almost all of those divisions have 3 or 4 teams that you could realistically see in the playoffs. You know, everyone in the AFC North you could picture in the playoffs. Everyone in the AFC East, other than the Patriots, you could picture in the playoffs. In the AFC South, like I said, I could picture 3 of those guys. The Titans, I don't really think I see making the playoffs, but really anything could happen. 3.5 there. So we're already up to 10 teams, and then the Chiefs kind of run that division alone. I don't think the Broncos or the Raiders, maybe the Chargers, if they figure things out with Justin Herbert. So, you know, we've hit 12 teams out of 16 that I could see making the wild card, and 5 of those are going to miss it. You know, it's a super duper tough AFC, and the Titans have done a really good job. Like I said, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this season. They kind of just started the rebuild. They've got a young quarterback, second-year guy. They're losing the face of their franchise to the Baltimore Ravens in Derrick Henry. But getting a guy like L'Jarius Sneed to really help captain that defense, to really help with that passing attack against them is something that I'm very excited to see. A couple years from now, if they're able to keep Snead around, if they're able to give him a long-term deal, getting him for just basically a third, and a pick swap is insane value. And we'll obviously have to see how he plays, but I'm very excited for what the Texans for what the Titans did this offseason. Very, very, very excited for them. Excited to see what Will Levis can do in that offense now. Again, revamped offensive line, new running back, new receivers. That AFC is going to be crazy. Anyway, in our next segment, we're going to transition into baseball. Opening day is just 3 days away. I am so excited. We're going to start doing some MLB predictions in future episodes. But I want to talk a little bit about Jordan Montgomery. He still is not signed to a team. It's getting to that point where you got to get on a team, man. You don't want to not be on a roster before opening day. Chemistry is just so important, especially if you're going to be slotted in as an important player on that team. These rosters have to be finalized soon. So we're going to look into that a little bit. Shohei Ohtani's press conference starts in 2 minutes, so I'm keeping an eye on that on the side as well. We're going to take a look into any big things he has to say about formal investigations in gambling stuff. That's a crazy story. We'll talk all about that tomorrow when all the information is out, because, like I said, it's going to start in just a minute. So baseball talk coming up next. Appreciate you guys for sticking around. You've been watching Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you were just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Titans offseason. Very excited about what they did, bringing in L'Jarius Sneed, Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard, lots of offensive line help. It's been a really solid offseason for a team that needed to have a solid offseason if they wanted to set themselves up in that right direction as they kind of dive headfirst into a rebuild. They've done a very good job. Before that, we talked about the new rules the NFL is putting out. The hip drop tackle, a little bit controversial. The players don't want it. The owners say it's for player safety. You can see both sides of the argument. A little bit controversial there. I'm not a big fan of that one. And the new challenge update rules, you only need to get one challenge right to get a third challenge instead of needing to get two. And we talked about the March Madness Sweet 16 being set. That those games start on Thursday, just like MLB opening day. But there's only one double-digit seed left. Only one team that's higher than only two teams that are higher than 6. I believe there's. It's very chalk, this bracket. But I think most of these Sweet 16 games, like 6 out of 8 of them, are going to be really, really tight, really close games, and I'm very excited to watch them. But in this segment, we are going to talk some baseball. Shohei Ohtani's press conference is scheduled to kick off. I haven't seen if it started yet. I'm keeping an eye out on that as well for any major news that comes off. Media is not going to be asking any questions. They're just there to report on what he has to say on the crazy story that is the gambling situation with him and his former translator Ipe. We'll break all of that down in much more detail tomorrow because we will have the report out and everything that comes with his press conference. But I wanted to focus a little bit more on free agents. I just kind of threw it out there that opening day's in 3 days, and there's still one major free agent that hasn't signed. There's a couple guys out there, but there's one major free agent that has yet to sign. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. We appreciate anything that you do give. If you leave a note with that tip or donation, it'll pop up on the bottom of the screen. We'll have a little discussion about what you had to say. And again, we appreciate anything you do give. We appreciate you guys for watching. Once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, there's one major free agent that is still left in the pool, still unsigned, just 3 days away from the opening day of Major League Baseball season 2024. Jordan Montgomery, World Series champion Jordan Montgomery, solid left-handed pitcher. He's reportedly looking for a multi-year deal, not one of those short-term deals that Cody Bellinger or Blake Snell got, although all four of those guys, Matt Chapman included, we're looking for those long-term deals, and none of them got it so far. Jordan Montgomery is in an interesting position where guys like Garrett Cole have gone down. The Angels are still looking for pitching. He is kind of at a position of leverage right now, and I know it doesn't seem like it because there's only 3 days left until opening day. But he kind of, he's running out of time. I don't think there has been much precedent for a starting pitcher that you're going to slot into like day 2 or day 3, slot 2 or slot 3 pitcher that is going to sign after the season begins. That's been a free agent all this time. I don't think there's much precedent for that. Jordan Montgomery is still out there. I think the Yankees are probably the team that's going to go and get him. Red Sox, I wouldn't be surprised if they went out and got him. They could use some pitching as well. But the Yankees, without Garrett Cole, they need someone to be that stopgap. Jordan Montgomery is not the same level as Garrett Cole. Not really close. Garrett Cole is perennially one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. But Jordan Montgomery can help shore up that rotation that really is really weak right now. It's it's a really, really weak rotation. And I'm surprised that they haven't made a move. Garrett Cole kind of was the head of that, and they need him if they want to make a run. They can't be missing Garrett Cole for 2.5 months and do nothing and expect to make a World Series run, especially in a division that they're in with the Rays, with the Orioles, with the Blue Jays, with the Red Sox. All of those teams are really, really good and can make a wild card. One of them's going to win the division. I expect at least one of those teams to make the wild card, maybe two. Who knows? We'll keep an eye on that division. But Jordan Montgomery still being out there. He's a lefty. He has solid stuff. He's 31, so he's a little bit older. But you sign him to like a 4-year deal. It's longer term. It's not quite the term he's looking for, but it's a bigger term than the rest of those Boris clients got. And you bring him into a contender, he could slot in very nicely. Jordan Montgomery is a pitcher that he has his ups and downs, but when he's on, you saw what he did in the postseason for the Rangers. He was a massive part of their World Series run. He shut down a bunch of teams on the way in there. A Rangers team that main weakness was pitching, or bullpen pitching. And he was able to keep the bullpen out of the game for a very long time in some very big moments. So having him still on the market is kind of surprising. I don't think I've ever experienced a big free agent like this still being out there this long. So we're keeping an eye out on that. I expect him to be signed soon. I really do. I would be shocked if he didn't. When was the last time? Anyway, that's a question for later. It's a very it's a very delicate situation because Scott Boras is kind of I think what's happening here a lot. It's less about the players and more about Scott Boras versus the owners. Scott Boras has kind of been able to push teams around a lot in recent seasons, in recent memory. He's kind of a super agent, I guess you could call him. He's been able to get a lot of huge deals for a lot of guys, and I think owners are kind of sick of him. So they're trying to put their boot in the ground and say, hey, we're not going to these crazy demands anymore. You've got to take our side. And they've won so far. Who knows? Maybe Montgomery will get that large deal. But I expect him to sign before March 28th, or I hope he signs before March 28th, because I don't know how that's going to affect rosters, because rosters are getting finalized right now. He's cutting it close. I know rosters can change. You can always pick up guys later, blah blah blah, whatever. But rosters are starting to get finalized, and you don't want to get too far in and not be on a team that's just catastrophic for your career. Maybe there's stuff that's not being reported that I've seen. I haven't seen anything negative about him. All the reports have been it's getting competitive for him. Lots of teams are in the mix. So I would expect him to have a deal done soon. But with the way that this offseason has been going for all the Boris clients, I have no idea. This might come down to the wire. This might be done midnight, March 27th. Who knows? I'm eagerly awaiting this. So keeping an eye on that. Very, very interesting situation. There's a couple other major free agents, not quite as big as Jordan Montgomery, not quite hitting the buzz. Solano, formerly of the Twins. There's 3 that were ranked in the top 50. So he's still out there. I don't know what the situation with him is. He'll probably go back to the Twins. But Jordan Montgomery would fit so well on so many teams. And it's kind of just shocking to me that he hasn't found a home yet. That's really what it is. I'm just surprised he hasn't found a home. It's an interesting part of the MLB offseason. I don't think I've seen this before. We've seen in every sport, really, it's a rush at the beginning and then nothing. And there's a couple big guys that just wait and wait and wait and wait. But waiting this long is a little risky, don't you think? Waiting this long is not something that I would recommend. Again, you can do your own thing. Go get your money. I'm all for players getting their money, but you're coming right against the deadline, man. I hope he gets signed. I expect him to. I think the Yankees would be a great landing spot for him. Now that Garrett Cole is hurt. But anyway, tomorrow we're going to talk about Shohei Ohtani and his press conference that is going on right now. I haven't heard anything from it. He's probably giving a long-winded statement. So we'll cover all of that coming up tomorrow. And yeah, thank you everybody so much for tuning in. This has been Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. You guys have a great rest of your day. Be here, same place, same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.